Hello, I'm Christy Coloutti, the principal of Northwest Primary School, and I'm here with another segment of our Rutland City Learning Lounge. And I'm super excited to have folks from our central office here talking about our budget. I will start just by having them introduce themselves, and then we'll get into the discussion. Mr. Olson.
Hi, Christy. I am Bill Olson, and I am the superintendent of Rutland City Public Schools.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Ted Plemenis, Chief Financial Officer and Business Manager.
Good morning, I'm Tim Smith, the Accounting Controller.
Hi, Bianca McKean, Assistant Superintendent.
Perfect. So we'll get started. First, I would like to say thank you to Superintendent Olson. As many of you know, he is retiring, so this will be his last segment on the budget. Unless you want to come back and talk about something else, that would be great. We could do that. But thank you, seriously, for all your time and service in Rutland City Public Schools.
Thanks, I appreciate it. It's been an honor and a pleasure to work in the district.
Nice.
It's a great district to be at.
Thank you.
So thank you.
So we'll just get started actually with you, maybe talking, I know we've been working a lot on the portrait of a graduate and a plan for the district, a strategic plan. So maybe if you could just give us a few highlights from that and then how it maybe impacts the budget.
Sure. So over the past 2 years, we're going probably now 2.5 years, we've been working on reestablishing the vision coming out of COVID, out of the pandemic, and the district worked with all members of the community members, school board members, staff, and students to develop a vision for what we see our students becoming at the end of 13 years. That's our portrait of a graduate. That's the vision. We then work that into developing a strategic plan to make sure we reach that vision. Same setup, worked with all members of the community to get there. So we have a plan for the next 5 years of how we want to have our students reach that vision. And of course that ties into budget. So as we start to develop responses to the plan and how we're going to try to take steps, we have to consider the budget and how do we allocate resources and funds to reach the goals of the strategic plan and the vision. So that's really just started this year especially, and we as different subgroups within the district have been considering different steps that we want to take to reach the different pieces of the plan, and as we start develop, probably it'll be more for next year's budget. How do we start to shift a little bit our resources to get to those different steps? So that's the immediate future.
Great. So how would you describe the state of the district today? So we've had resources in the past, we had ESSER funding and key personnel in different roles. How would you describe the state of the district today?
I think, and Bianca McKean might help me with this at some point, but we've been in a pretty good position. Coming out of the pandemic, we were gifted by the federal government with a significant amount of money that I think the district used quite wisely. We used a lot of that to help kids who needed tutoring help, those kinds of things. We spent some money on mental health counseling, the things that were immediate from the pandemic. We also looked long term and said we can use some of this to try to do some of the capital projects that we really needed to have happen. And there were parameters for that. You could only use money for certain things, like HVAC systems, trying to make the environment a lot cleaner. So we spent money on flooring, on HVAC, on trying to make sure that the buildings basically were healthier. And this is all work that had been in our needs assessment. And the money for that work would have had to come out of the local budget. So this money actually coming from the federal government saved the local taxpayers quite a bit. We reinvested that and took a big chunk of what our future work would have been off the table. And so we're in a good position that way. I think the other part of you're asked about what our status is. Legislation changed recently that gave different weights to students, and because of the needs of the students in Rutland City, we really benefited from that. So we're seeing, they give us, to make it simple, they give us counts for what our students are. It's not the actual enrollment numbers, but they weight students a certain way. and we ended up having a pretty good number of students based on weights coming our way, and that helps helps the taxpayer and helps with the amount of money that we have to come up with to give back to the state. So we're in a good position that way.
Can I just interrupt? So
yeah.
when you say weights, can you explain maybe to somebody watching, what does that mean? What are the factors? What are some of the factors that play into a student's weight in
Yeah.
terms of the fiscal piece of it?
I can take it or you can take it.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So students are weighted for poverty. They're weighted for if you live in a rural area. They're weighted for if students are English language learners, or now they're called multi-language learners. I think those are the three big
Sparsity population.
sparsity population, right? So students that are classified that way count for more, in other words, and so you're going to get better funded that way. And so we have a significant number of at least some of those students in our district, and that helps us. It benefits the district that way and benefits the local taxpayer.
Great.
If I could add to that,
Sure.
the intent of those weights that Bill has just described were established by Act 127 a couple of years ago. And the intent of those weights was to give recognition that some of the factors that Bill just described add to the cost of providing educational
Right.
services.
Okay.
And so the intent was to incorporate additional taxing capacity and budgeting availability for those communities who are charged with educating students who are from various backgrounds or require various services. So it was an attempt to basically align the student counts with funding needs in a way that had been better because the previous weights were developed more than 20 years ago and were way out of date.
So looking at the FY26 budget, what are some important aspects that you're seeing coming up in the budget?
So do you want to go to Ted or do you want to? Yeah.
Whoever wants to answer it. I'm just
Go
trying
ahead.
to
You
figure
wanna-
out
Yeah,
questions that would
I
help
can
the
start, sure.
general public.
You know, we tried to make sure that we kept programming as is. That was our goal, and at the same time, looking for, across the county, across the state, we are seeing declining student enrollment. So we're looking for areas where, if we didn't need that staffing, we would eliminate that staffing, and that's being responsible to the taxpayer. We want to make sure that we're not funding a position that really truly isn't needed based on enrollment numbers. So we were able to achieve that. We were able to get basically programming is the same as what we had before, but with slightly lower numbers in staffing, and so I think we're in a pretty good position there. But Ted might have more.
Sure. Well, those are certainly the key points, but I can add a couple of additional observations. As Bill said initially, it's consistent with the goals of the strategic plan, naturally. We're doing our best and we're succeeding in proposing to keep our educational programming pretty much the same. We always budget to ensure operations continuity and safety. So from a buildings, grounds, and transportation standpoint, we're always relying upon our director to tell us, what maintenance is required this year and in the coming years to maintain that for everybody's health and well-being. Staffing, again, as Bill said, near the current year levels. So basically, we followed this year a process that we do each year, which is we build the budget from the ground up. We meet with Bill, Bianca, other key members of the administrative team early in the fall to ask them, based on the educational program that you wish to deliver in the forward year, what do you believe the staffing and funding requirements are going to be? And that goes through several iterations with many of our constituents. So that is the means by which we end up building each year a budget, as Bill said, that we consider to be responsible, reasonable, and very importantly, sustainable for the long term, because decisions we make in any given year naturally are going to have implications for future years. I would add one thing in terms of something about our fiscal 26 budget that is different than previous years, and that is I would characterize this of the 4 to 5 years that I've been here with Rutland City Public Schools. This is the tightest budget that I have seen so far. And we always endeavor to be as prudent and fiscally responsible as we can. But just as an example, you'll sometimes hear us talk about the fact that 80% of the budget is for employee compensation, salaries and benefits. 20% of the budget is for everything else. Well, for fiscal 26, that 20% is going down by 2% and several $100,000 from year to year. So everything other than salary and benefits, we are reducing those costs. That means, of course, that we are not only absorbing inflation, but we're making additional cuts. And because we also make room for seed funds for key projects, such as a strategic telephone replacement that's going to come up and for which we're going to spend about $200,000 in fiscal 26, we make room for that too. So we've gone through a number of iterations because we understand that it's our obligation to be as responsible as we can with taxpayer dollars. And so I think this is a very successful budget recommendation, and certainly I hope on town meeting day the voters will agree.
Right, for sure. So, Mr. Smith, with your knowledge of our budget, history of being a school board member, a taxpayer, what are some of the benefits that you're seeing for a taxpayer to support our budget here in Rutland City?
Well, I think it's important that city voters consider a couple different things. First and foremost, that they understand that they have a group of professionals who work for the school district, the superintendent, CFO, others in the business office, teachers and staff who all understand the enormous duty that we carry to provide a quality education and an equitable education to all of our students, while at the same time recognizing that resources are scarce and that we've all been entrusted to be good financial stewards of the taxpayer dollars. So it's important that city residents understand that. Number two, I would say that our families are changing. Kids are coming to school every day with a very new set of challenges that were really unforeseen several years ago prior to the pandemic. We've seen an increase in students experiencing homelessness. We've seen an increase in refugee families moving to Rutland, which is good, but oftentimes their kids don't speak English. We've seen just a variety of behavior and mental health challenges. And certainly providing services to these students costs more money. However, that said, I would say that the potential in each of these students is the same as any other student. And I know that our teachers are working very hard every day to find that potential, tap into that potential, and help those kids show out the potential. And certainly we're very grateful for our teachers and all of our staff for really going above and beyond what has normally been expected to meet the needs of students every day.
So Ted, I'm going to direct this back to you. Could you give an example of how much our budget in Rutland City is impacting a taxpayer? So if a property tax owner is paying this amount, then they would have to increase. Are you able to give that perspective? Just so like the person sitting at home watching this is like, well, how much are my taxes actually going to go up because of the school budget?
Right. Well, that's a very important question, obviously. The first comment that I'm going to make in answering your question, Christy, is to say that twofold. We don't set the school budget based on taxes, but we are obviously very sensitive to the implications for tax rate. And at this point in time, based upon the data we have, as of today, January 21st, we anticipate that the homestead property tax rate for Rutland City will decline by 6 cents in the coming fiscal year to $1.61 versus $1.67. That is likely to change because that's based upon a metric provided by the state called the property yield. And we're working with the initial assumption provided by the tax commissioner in December. It won't be final until the legislature sets that official rate. And just to give you an example, that rate currently is about $8,500, that yield. If that were to change by simply a few $100s, that could mean that the estimated tax rate would be about flat instead of being down 6 cents. So there's still some variability yet to go. But the good news is our indications are suggesting to us that it's not an increase. And how much of a decrease will remain to be seen. I do want to add something, though, which provides some context, and that is that the majority of homestead owners in Rutland City do not pay the statutory published rate of $1.61. And that is because the vast majority of people in Vermont, as a matter of fact, as well as in Rutland City, qualify for income-based tax credits, which reduce the estimated tax liability each year. And I won't go into the details of the mechanics, but the bottom line is, in Rutland City, probably about 20% of our homestead owners actually pay the statutory $1.61 rate, or the projected, and about 80% pay less than that. Some pay significantly less than that because the state has set up the arrangements in such a way that there's a graduation in that income-based tax credit based upon your income. So I hope that's helpful.
Yes, for sure. So we saw a lot of local districts, unfortunately, their budgets didn't pass last March. What are we doing to ensure that we have appropriate communications out there for the public, just to get the word out? While we know in-house we're being financially responsible, how do we get the word out to others? Do you want to elaborate on different ways we're doing that?
Sure. Well, I think it's important that we, everyone's always going to complain about taxes, right? But I think it's really important that we keep sharing out the good news that is happening each and every day in our schools. Our students are making incredible progress, and we are very proud of their uniqueness and their accomplishments, both small and big. And city residents need to see and share in those successes so that they can have the trust and faith that we're developing young adults who will grow into future leaders to lead our community. So keep sharing in the good news. I also think it's important that, as Ted mentioned, there are many challenges that lie ahead. Education finance is very complex, and there's been speculation that there could be more changes forthcoming in this legislative session. So I just think it's important as a school district to just be open and transparent with residents, to try to explain to them some of the variables and components that go into determining their tax rates and how a lot of them are outside of our control. As Ted mentioned, we have to be very cautious when we try to project any potential tax increase or tax decrease because, again, things can change. Things can change late in the game. Typically, the homestead yield is not determined until the conclusion of the legislative session in June. So just being clear, transparent, setting proper expectations. And again, we're not budgeting specifically to hit a target tax rate. We're budgeting to meet the needs of our students and to do that in alignment with the goals of the strategic plan that Bill spoke to.
Can I add on to that?
Of course.
So just so if you really love getting into the budget and getting the details, this show is, of course, is an opportunity. But PEG TV has on its YouTube website all the different school board meetings that have happened over the past 6 months, and Tim and Ted have gone through month by month from I think September onward, with a significant portion of each of our school board meetings devoted to explaining how are we getting to the budget. And so if you'd like to get more into the weeds on that, checking out those few-minute segments in each of the school board meeting would be a great idea for you. It's all right there, and it speaks to Tim's concept of transparency. We're also trying to get out to the public over the next few weeks before the March vote, just to be able to make ourselves available to people to ask, if people have more questions, and we'll have a flyer out, the usual things that we do. But I think the best source of information is those YouTube PEG TV segments, because you really see in detail with all the charts that they've created how the budget was created. Yeah. So it's good.
Let me also add on to what Tim and Bill said.
Of course.
Thank you. Because as they're pointing out, it's a complex area. We typically talk about it once, maybe twice per year. And so confusion or misunderstanding is natural, and it's understandable. And so therefore, as Bill pointed out, we try and make ourselves available for small group sessions Tonight, we have a not-so-small group session. We are joining the Board of Aldermen and the Board of Alderwomen to provide an update as members of the community together. We want to share with them the understanding that we have, solicit their feedback as civic leaders, and incorporate that as best we can. So we try and provide that reach out in a number of different ways and forums, but as Bill said, there's a lot of great information out there on YouTube and on some of the district websites. The last thing that I'd say is, to me, what I've learned in looking back over the last year or two of communications is it's important to try and avoid in information, because if there's a void and you're not providing some helpful feedback, that provides room for negative messaging and misdirected messaging to come in. People understandably are concerned given some of the legislative uncertainty, and these are difficult economic times for many people, and so again, that sort of concern can be understandable, but we're here to answer questions, and we, as Tim said, we want to be as transparent as we possibly can.
If I could add too, I am proud to be a city resident and a taxpayer myself, and I'm also very proud of our community, that I feel they have traditionally supported our schools and our school budget. And I think that is because our taxpayers know that we work to provide a quality education for all of our students, and we do so by thinking differently about our programming and using our resources. Sometimes we're very fiscally responsible, and we think kind of creatively about meeting the needs of our students. One of the reasons we can do that is because we are a larger district, especially when you look at the Rutland region. And that allows us to, we have more students, and we can kind of use our staffing and our programmings differently. We are working with our community partners. We have had our administrative cabinet meet with both GE and Rutland Regional Medical Center to hear what kinds of skills our students need when they graduate, and we are working to think about schooling not only to meet the academic needs of our students and all of the other needs that people have discussed, but also to ensure that we're helping to build graduates that are going to be workforce ready, college and career ready, and we do that by looking at our resources differently, and I think that we are helping to lead the county in those efforts, partially because of our size. So, we, as Ted said, we encourage people to ask us. I would encourage people to watch those school board meetings, or to, talk to people who work in the schools and spend their time in our schools every day, because we are really looking to be responsible, but also to ensure a quality education that prepares our students for life after being in the public schools, and to help them be contributing members of society that will be voting on their school budgets in the future. So.
Well said. I absolutely appreciate all the supports and things that we are able to provide to our students. Does anybody have any final thoughts on the budget before we conclude this segment?
Well, the only thing I'd add in, Ted kind of gave the down and dirty. We expected to see a few cents decrease in the tax rate. So sometimes that's all people want to know.
Hear, right.
But connecting back to what Bianca said, I think what this district does is, for this wide range of kids that we have with a wide range of needs, we are big enough to support that wide range. And so we have a lot of supports in place for every kind of kid, whatever they're going to do after school, and however they're going to serve the community. So we're trying to make sure that kind of structure stays in place. You see that there's a challenge in that statewide and regionally when enrollment goes down. And so I think what's going to have to happen in this county is we're going to have to determine, how do we deal with declining enrollment, and how do we work together as districts to try to support kids in the city and outside the city. So I think there's going to be, over the next few years, some need for decisions to be made about how do we do that, because we want to support all our kids in Vermont, and we want to make sure that that they're going to come and lead the future for us. So that's, I think we have an advantage there in the city because we have a certain size that allows us to offer a lot to kids, but that's going to be a consideration over time in the county. How do we do that in the future?
I will also say that Tim mentioned that, school finance is a very complex topic, and it really is. For people who don't do this work every day, it can be hard to determine kind of how the budget comes to be and how the funding works. And there's a lot happening at the state level regarding different trends, and we are trying to stay up to date and knowledgeable about that so that we can ensure that when we are building our budget and when we are funding our schools, we are doing the best we can with the information we have from the state and projecting into the future. If things were to change, we want to try to be stable and consistent in how we build our budget to ensure we're meeting needs. And I do think, as everybody highlighted, our size helps us to be able to be a little more predictable with some of those costs and some of those structures. We also continue to receive, we do receive some federal grant funding, although ESSER is no longer. There's other federal grant funding that we receive. And, we think about how we're using those funds to offset a lot of other costs that we would have as a district and ensure, once again, that we're being responsible. So, I just want the community to also understand that, yes, it is complex, and, we really are working to understand that, predict changes, and ensure that we can continue to meet the needs of our students.
These two gentlemen especially are connected to that. I think they've been tied into the business office group that works on this and ties in with the legislature, so they're really up to date. And when Tim talked about the professionals that are leading the charge, they're good examples of that. Yeah. They have all kinds of meetings about how the budget's going to lay out across the state. I thought they were just going up to these meetings just for the coffee and the brownies that they serve. Yeah,
good lunch.
But really it's to make sure that we're in sync with what's happening in the legislature, and we're prepared for that. So the coffee and the brownies were just extras. Yeah.
All right, well, thank you guys. This is great information for our community. If anybody has any specific questions, they're more than welcome to go on the website, call a school, talk to folks that are working in our schools. So thank you so much for watching this segment of the Learning Lounge.